You know that feeling when you walk into a room and immediately know you're not wanted? Well, multiply that by 10, and you'll understand what I experienced last Tuesday evening at Romano's, the most exclusive Italian restaurant in downtown Chicago. My name is Celeste Valeria Montenegro, and I'm about to tell you a story that will make you question everything you think you know about family, belonging, and the power of keeping your cards close to your chest. Picture this. I'm standing outside Romano's, adjusting my simple black dress, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as the Whitmore family, my boyfriend Derek's family, settles into their reserved corner booth. The warm golden light from the crystal chandeliers catches the expensive jewelry adorning Derek's mother, Patricia, while his father, Reginald, adjusts his silk tie with the confidence of a man who's never been told no. Derek had been dating me for 8 months, but this was the first time I was meeting his family. And let me tell you, the tension was thicker than Chicago's winter fog, even before I stepped through those mahogany doors. As I approached their table, I could hear Patricia's voice, sharp as a blade, cutting through the restaurant's ambient music. Derek, darling, are you absolutely certain about this girl? I mean, look at her background. She's from, well, you know, that part of town. Derek's younger sister, Vivian, barely looked up from her phone as she added, I don't understand why you can't date someone from our circle, like Madison Ashworth. Now she's wife material. I took a deep breath, straightening my shoulders. Growing up in the south side of Chicago, I'd learned early that you either develop thick skin or you don't survive. But nothing, and I mean nothing, had prepared me for what was about to unfold. Good evening, I said, approaching the table with a smile that I hoped looked more confident than I felt. You must be Derek's family. I'm Celeste. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia's eyes scanned me from head to toe, taking in my simple dress, my modest jewelry, my carefully styled but not professionally done hair. I could practically hear her mental calculator running, adding up the cost of my outfit and finding it lacking. Celeste, Patricia repeated as if my name left a bad taste in her mouth. How exotic. And Montenegro. That's Spanish, isn't it? It's actually Portuguese, I corrected gently. My grandmother immigrated from Portugal in the 1960s. Reginald leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. And what do you do for work, Celeste? Here's where it gets interesting. You see, I could have told them the truth right then and there. I could have explained that I owned 3 successful restaurants in Chicago, that I'd worked 16-hour days for the past 5 years building my empire, that I'd graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern with a degree in business administration. But something about their condescending tone, their obvious discomfort with my presence, made me decide to play along with their assumptions. I work in the restaurant industry, I said simply. Derek squeezed my hand under the table, sensing the tension. Celeste is amazing at what she does. She's incredibly hardworking and, oh, we're sure she is, Patricia interrupted, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. It's just that, well, Derek comes from a certain background, you understand. We have expectations. The waiter approached our table, a young man named Marcus, whom I recognized but who thankfully didn't seem to recognize me yet. He was new, probably hadn't worked enough shifts to know all the staff protocols. Good evening, folks. Can I start you off with some drinks? Marcus asked, his professional smile firmly in place. We'll have a bottle of your finest Barolo, Reginald announced, the kind of man who equated expensive wine with personal worth. As Marcus poured the wine, Patricia continued her interrogation. So, Celeste, which restaurant do you work at? Somewhere nice, I hope. I took a sip of the wine. It was actually one of my personal favorites from my restaurant's cellar, and smiled. I work at several places, actually. I like to keep busy. Multiple jobs? Vivian finally looked up from her phone, her expression a mixture of pity and disgust. Oh, honey, that must be so exhausting. The condescension in her voice was palpable. These people had never worked a day in their lives, never struggled to make ends meet, never had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. They lived in their ivory tower, looking down at everyone else with a mixture of disdain and ignorance. It keeps me grounded, I replied, maintaining my composure, even as my blood began to boil. Derek tried to change the subject. Mom, Dad, Celeste went to Northwestern. She's incredibly smart. Oh, how wonderful, Patricia said, her tone suggesting it was anything but wonderful. On scholarship, I assume. The question hung in the air like a challenge. I could see what she was doing, trying to put me in my place, trying to remind me that I didn't belong in their world of privilege and entitlement. Actually, I paid my own way, I said, which was true. I'd worked 3 jobs through college, saving every penny to avoid taking on debt. How admirable, Reginald said, though his tone suggested he found it anything but admirable. It's always nice to see young people with such determination. The evening continued like this, with each family member taking turns to subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, express their disapproval of me. They questioned my family background, my education, my career prospects, my intentions with Derek. They made snide comments about my appearance, my accent, my mannerisms. Derek tried to defend me, but he was outnumbered and clearly uncomfortable confronting his family. I could see the conflict in his eyes, torn between loyalty to his family and his feelings for me. As the main course arrived, a beautifully prepared osso buco that I knew was one of my head chef's specialties, Patricia leaned forward, her voice taking on a more serious tone. Celeste, dear, I think we need to be honest with each other. Derek is our only son, and he's going to inherit significant responsibilities. He needs a partner who can, how should I put this, complement his lifestyle. What my wife is trying to say, Reginald added, is that Derek needs someone from his own social circle, someone who understands the obligations that come with our family name. I felt my jaw clench. These people barely knew me, yet they'd already decided I wasn't good enough for their son. They'd made their judgment based on assumptions, prejudices, and their own narrow world view. I see, I said carefully. And what exactly do you think I don't understand about Derek's lifestyle? Oh, darling, Patricia laughed, a sound like breaking glass. It's not your fault, really. You simply come from a different world. You wouldn't understand the pressures, the expectations, the social obligations, the charity galas, the board meetings, the need to maintain appearances. You don't belong here, Vivian added bluntly, apparently bored with her mother's subtlety. I mean, look around. This isn't your kind of place. And there it was, the words that would change everything. You don't belong here. I looked around Romano's, at the elegant decor I'd personally selected, at the paintings I'd commissioned from local artists, at the custom-made furniture I'd spent months choosing. This restaurant was more than my business. It was my dream, realized, my vision brought to life. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Marcus approached our table again, this time to check on our meals, and that's when everything changed. How is everything this evening? He asked, his eyes scanning the table before landing on me. There was a moment of recognition, a flicker of confusion, and then his eyes widened in realization. Oh my God, he whispered, his professional composure cracking. Miss Montenegro, I didn't realize you were dining with us tonight. The entire table fell silent. Patricia's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Reginald's hand froze on his wine glass. Derek looked confused, his eyes darting between Marcus and me. Everything's wonderful, Marcus, I said calmly, though my heart was racing. Could you please ask Giovanni to come to the table? I'd like him to meet Derek's family. Marcus nodded quickly, his face pale. Of course, Miss Montenegro. Right away. As Marcus hurried away, I could feel the weight of 4 pairs of eyes on me. The silence stretched on, becoming more uncomfortable with each passing second. Celeste, Derek said slowly, why did he call you Miss Montenegro? And who's Giovanni? I took a slow sip of wine, savoring the moment. After an evening of condescension and thinly veiled insults, I was about to turn their world upside down. Giovanni is my head chef, I said simply. He's been with me for 3 years now, ever since I opened Romano's. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Patricia's face went through several color changes, from pink to red to an alarming shade of purple. Reginald's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Vivian dropped her phone, which clattered onto her plate. "Opened Romano's?" Derek whispered, his voice barely audible. "What do you mean, opened Romano's?" I smiled, finally allowing myself to feel the satisfaction I'd been suppressing all evening. "I mean, Derek, that I own this restaurant. I own Romano's and 2 others in the city. I've been trying to tell you, but somehow the conversation never seemed to go in that direction." The explosion of voices that followed was immediate and chaotic. Patricia began sputtering about impossibility and lies. Reginald demanded proof. Vivian started Googling my name frantically on her phone. And Derek just stared at me with a mixture of shock, confusion, and something that might have been admiration. But before anyone could process what was happening, Giovanni appeared at our table, his chef's whites immaculate despite the busy kitchen he'd just left. "Miss Montenegro," he said with a warm smile, completely oblivious to the tension at the table. "What a wonderful surprise. I hope you're enjoying the osso buco. I prepared it personally when Marcus told me you were here." "It's perfect, Giovanni," I said, standing to give him a quick hug. "I'd like you to meet Derek's family. This is Patricia, Reginald, and Vivian Whitmore." Giovanni's face lit up with recognition. "The Whitmores, of course. Miss Montenegro speaks of Derek often. Such a pleasure to meet you all." If the table had been quiet before, it was now completely silent. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to fade away as the reality of the situation sank in. I owned the restaurant where they'd just spent the evening telling me I didn't belong. The aftermath of Giovanni's cheerful introduction was like watching a slow-motion car crash. Patricia's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the fact that her face had gone completely white. Reginald's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his wine glass. Vivian sat frozen, her phone still displaying my business profile on the screen. But it was Derek's reaction that surprised me the most. Instead of the shock and confusion I expected, I saw something else in his eyes. Hurt. Not hurt because I owned restaurants, but hurt because I hadn't told him. "Celeste," he said quietly, after Giovanni had returned to the kitchen, "why didn't you tell me?" It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself for months. Why hadn't I told him? At first, it was because I wanted to make sure he was interested in me, not my success. Then it became a matter of timing. When do you casually mention that you're a millionaire restaurateur? But sitting here now, watching his family's shocked faces, I realized there might have been another reason. "I wanted to see who you really were," I said honestly. "All of you. I wanted to understand what kind of people I was potentially joining my life with." Patricia finally found her voice. "This is impossible. You're a waitress, a server. You said you worked in restaurants." "I do work in restaurants," I replied calmly. "I work in them because I own them. I'm there almost every day, checking on operations, working with staff, ensuring quality. Just because I own them doesn't mean I don't work in them." Reginald cleared his throat, his business instincts kicking in despite his obvious discomfort. "Romano's is one of the most successful restaurants in Chicago. The owner would have to be, well, quite wealthy." "Quite wealthy indeed," I confirmed. "My restaurants generated over $2 million in revenue last year. Not bad for someone who doesn't belong here, wouldn't you say?" The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear the gears turning in their heads as they processed this information. The woman they'd been condescending to all evening, the woman they deemed unworthy of their son, was actually more successful than they'd ever imagined. Derek reached across the table and took my hand. "Celeste, I'm so sorry. I had no idea they would. I knew they could be difficult, but this... Difficult?" I raised an eyebrow. "Derek, your mother just spent the last hour telling me I don't belong in your world. Your sister openly said I wasn't good enough for you. Your father questioned my education, my background, my worthiness. Difficult doesn't begin to cover it." Vivian finally spoke up, her voice small and uncertain. "But you let us... You didn't correct us when we assumed. When you assumed I was poor? When you assumed I was uneducated? When you assumed I was some gold digger after your brother's money? I let the words hang in the air. No, I didn't correct you. I wanted to see exactly who you were when you thought you had all the power. Patricia's composure was cracking. This is all very unexpected, but it doesn't change the fundamental issues. Success in the restaurant business doesn't necessarily translate to understanding our social circles. I almost laughed at her persistence. Even faced with undeniable evidence of my success, she was still trying to maintain her position of superiority. Your social circles, I repeated. You mean the charity galas where you write checks to feel better about yourselves? The board meetings where you make decisions about industries you've never actually worked in? The appearances you maintain while looking down on everyone who actually creates value in this world? Now see here, Reginald began, his voice rising slightly. No, you see here, I interrupted, my patience finally wearing thin. I've spent this entire evening listening to you judge me based on your assumptions and prejudices. You decided I wasn't good enough for Derek before you even met me. You questioned my character, my intelligence, my worthiness, all based on what? The fact that I don't flaunt my wealth? The fact that I actually work for a living? I stood up, suddenly feeling the need to move, to pace, to do something with the energy that was building inside me. Let me tell you something about my social circles. I employ over 60 people across my 3 restaurants. I've put 12 kids through college with my scholarship program. I donate meals to 3 homeless shelters every week. I've revitalized an entire block in the South Side by opening my 2nd location there. The restaurant around us seemed to fade away as I continued. I don't need charity galas to make a difference. I don't need board meetings to create value. I don't need to maintain appearances because my work speaks for itself. Derek was watching me with something that looked like awe. Celeste, I had no idea. You've done all of this? I've done all of this, I confirmed. I've built everything I have from nothing. I worked 3 jobs through college, saved every penny, took risks that could have bankrupted me. I failed more times than I can count, but I kept going because I had a vision. Patricia was staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. But why didn't you tell us? Why put us through this? Put you through this? I turned to face her directly. Mrs. Whitmore, with all due respect, I didn't put you through anything. You chose to judge me. You chose to belittle me. You chose to tell me I don't belong here. All I did was let you show me who you really are. But it was all a misunderstanding, she protested weakly. Was it? I asked. If I were actually what you thought I was, a waitress working multiple jobs to make ends meet, would that have made me less worthy of your son's love? Would that have made me less deserving of basic respect? The question hung in the air like a challenge, because that was the real issue, wasn't it? Not that they'd misjudged my wealth, but that they deemed me unworthy based on what they thought my economic status was. That's not. Patricia struggled to find words. That's exactly what it is, I said firmly. You don't have a problem with poor people in theory. You probably donate to charity, maybe even volunteer at a soup kitchen once a year for the photo opportunity. But the moment your son brings home someone you perceive as being from a lower class, suddenly it's a problem. Marcus appeared at our table again, looking nervous. Miss Montenegro, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's an issue in the kitchen that requires your attention. I nodded, grateful for the interruption. Of course, Marcus. Please tell Giovanni I'll be right there. As Marcus hurried away, I turned back to the table. I need to attend to restaurant business. Derek, we should talk later, privately. Wait, Reginald said, his business instincts overriding his personal discomfort. I think we should discuss this further. Perhaps we were hasty in our judgments. Hasty? I repeated. Mr. Whitmore, you spent 2 hours telling me I don't belong in your family. You questioned my intelligence, my character, my worthiness. You made assumptions about my background and my intentions. You treated me like I was some kind of threat to your son's future. But if we had known, Vivian began. If you had known I was wealthy, you would have treated me differently, I finished. And that, right there, is exactly the problem. Your respect shouldn't be contingent on my bank account. Derek stood up as well. Celeste, please, let's talk about this. My family, they're not usually like this. I looked at him, this man I'd been dating for 8 months, and realized I was seeing him clearly for the first time. Aren't they, Derek? Or is this exactly what they're like when they think no one important is watching? The truth was, I was disappointed in Derek too. Not because he hadn't defended me more strongly, although that stung, but because in 8 months of dating, he'd never once asked me about my work in any detail. He'd never shown real curiosity about my life, my dreams, my achievements. He'd been content to keep me in a neat little box labeled girlfriend, without ever really seeing me as a full person. I need to go handle the kitchen situation, I said, picking up my purse. The meal is on the house, obviously. Giovanni will take care of anything else you need. As I walked away from the table, I could hear them talking in urgent, hushed tones. Patricia's voice was sharp with panic. Reginald's was calculating and Derek's was pleading. But I didn't stop to listen. I had a restaurant to run, and suddenly that felt like a relief. The kitchen was its usual controlled chaos. Flames dancing on stovetops, knives chopping in rhythm, servers weaving between stations. It was my element, my world, and walking into it felt like coming home after a long, exhausting journey. "What's the issue, Giovanni?" I asked, tying an apron around my waist out of habit. "Actually, no issue," he admitted with a sheepish smile. "I saw the tension at your table and thought you might need an excuse to escape." I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd had all evening. "You know me too well." "The family? They did not know?" he asked gently. Giovanni had been with me since the beginning, had watched me build this empire from nothing. He understood better than anyone what it meant to me. "They knew I worked in restaurants," I said, checking on the night's specials. "They just assumed that meant I was poor. And this was a problem for them?" I nodded, focusing on plating a dish, even though I didn't need to. "Very much a problem." "Then they are fools," Giovanni said simply. "And the boyfriend? That was the question, wasn't it?" "I don't know yet. He's complicated." Through the kitchen's pass-through window, I could see the Whitmore table. They were still deep in discussion, their body language tense and urgent. Derek kept looking toward the kitchen, clearly wanting to follow me, but not quite daring to leave his family. "Miss Montenegro?" Marcus appeared at my elbow, looking nervous. "The family at table 12 is asking when you'll be back. They want to apologize, I think." I looked at Marcus, this young man who was working his way through college just like I had. "Marcus, what do you think of people who judge others based on their job or their economic status?" He looked surprised by the question. "I think they're missing the point of what makes someone valuable," he said after a moment. "Some of the best people I know are the ones working the hardest just to get by." "Exactly," I said. "Remember that as you move through the world. Someone's worth isn't determined by their bank account." "Is that what happened out there?" he asked quietly. "That's exactly what happened out there," I confirmed. "And now they want to apologize because they found out I'm not what they thought I was." "Are you going to forgive them?" It was a good question. Was I going to forgive them? Could I forgive them? More importantly, did they deserve forgiveness? "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I suppose I should go find out." As I walked back towards the dining room, I reflected on the evening's events. In the span of 2 hours, I'd gone from being dismissed as unworthy to being courted for forgiveness. But the only thing that had changed was their perception of my wealth. I was still the same person, with the same values, the same heart, the same dreams. The real question wasn't whether I could forgive them. The real question was whether Derek was worth the complications that came with his family. And that was a question I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. Walking back to the dining room felt like entering a courtroom where I was simultaneously the judge, jury, and key witness. The Whitmore family sat in uncomfortable silence, their earlier confidence replaced by something that looked suspiciously like fear. Derek stood up as I approached, his face a mixture of hope and anxiety. "Celeste, he began, but I held up a hand. Before anyone says anything, I announced, settling back into my chair, I want to make something perfectly clear. I'm not angry because you misjudged my financial status. I'm angry because you treated another human being with disrespect based on assumptions and prejudices. Patricia leaned forward, her voice carefully modulated. Celeste, dear, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. We would never... Stop, I said firmly. Just stop. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this was a misunderstanding. You looked at me and made a series of judgments based on what you thought I was worth financially. You decided I wasn't good enough for Derek before you even knew my last name. Reginald cleared his throat. Perhaps we could start over. Get to know each other properly. Start over, I repeated. Mr. Whitmore, you can't unhear the things you said. You can't undo the assumptions you made. You can't pretend that your character wasn't revealed in those moments when you thought you had all the power. The truth was, I'd been in situations like this before. Not exactly like this, but close enough. When you're a successful woman, especially a successful woman of color, you learn to navigate a world that's constantly underestimating you. You learn to read people, to understand their motivations, to see past their polite facades. But surely you can understand our position, Patricia said, her voice taking on a pleading tone. Derek is our only son. We want to protect him. Protect him from what? I asked. From someone who works hard, from someone who's built something meaningful, from someone who actually understands the value of money because she's earned every penny. Derek finally spoke up. Celeste, you have to understand. They're not usually like this. They're good people. They just... Derek, I interrupted, turning to face him directly. Do you really believe that? Do you really think this is unusual behavior for them? He hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw the truth. This wasn't aberrant behavior. This was exactly who they were when they thought no one important was watching. I think, he said carefully, that they're scared. They're scared of losing me, scared of change, scared of not understanding your world. My world, I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Derek, what exactly do you think my world is? I live in Chicago just like you do. I went to Northwestern just like you did. I work hard, I pay my taxes, I contribute to my community. The only difference is that I actually built something instead of inheriting it. Vivienne, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. I Googled you, she said, holding up her phone. You're actually famous. There are articles about you in Forbes, in Chicago Magazine. You won the Young Entrepreneur of the Year award last year. I did, I confirmed. And you have that scholarship program, she continued, reading from her phone. You've put 12 kids through college. 13, actually. We just awarded the newest scholarship last month. And you donate meals to homeless shelters. Every week. And you revitalized that block on the south side. It's my neighborhood. I wanted to give back. Vivienne looked up from her phone, her expression confused. But why didn't you tell us any of this? Because, I said patiently, I shouldn't have to recite my resume to earn basic respect. The fact that I'm successful doesn't make me a better person than someone who's struggling. The fact that I'm wealthy doesn't make me more deserving of kindness than someone who's poor. But it does make you more suitable for Derek, Patricia said quietly. And there it was. The ugly truth laid bare. Mrs. Whitmore, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Are you saying that my worth as a human being is determined by my net worth? No, of course not. But what? But it makes me more acceptable as a girlfriend? But it means I'm no longer a threat to your family's social standing? But it means you can stop worrying about what your country club friends will think. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed muted, as if the entire establishment was holding its breath. I need to ask you something, Derek, I said, turning to face him. In 8 months of dating, have you ever asked me about my work? I mean really asked, not just how was your day, but actually shown interest in what I do. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The answer was written all over his face. Have you ever wondered how I afford my apartment, my car, my clothes? Have you ever been curious about my life outside of our relationship? I thought you were private about work stuff, he said weakly. I was testing you, I admitted. I wanted to see if you were interested in me as a person or just as a girlfriend. I wanted to see if you would ask questions, show curiosity, try to understand my world. And I failed, he said quietly. You failed, I confirmed. Not because you didn't guess I was wealthy, but because you never tried to really know me. Patricia was watching this exchange with growing alarm. Surely this can all be worked out, she said. Now that we know the truth, we can... What truth? I asked. The truth that I'm wealthy? The truth that I'm successful? Mrs. Whitmore, those things don't change who I am as a person. They don't change my values, my character, my worthiness of respect. But they do change your compatibility with our family, Reginald said bluntly. At least he was being honest. You're right, I said. They do change my compatibility with your family, because now I know exactly who you are. I know that your respect is conditional. I know that your acceptance depends on social status. I know that you judge people based on their economic circumstances rather than their character. That's not fair, Derek protested. You set us up. You let us make assumptions. I let you reveal your true selves, I corrected. I didn't make you say those things. I didn't make you treat me with disrespect. I didn't make you decide I wasn't good enough for you. A waiter approached our table. Not Marcus this time, but Elena, one of my most experienced servers. Miss Montenegro, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have the mayor's office on the phone. Something about the community development project? I nodded. Please tell them I'll call back first thing in the morning. As Elena walked away, I noticed the Whitmore family exchanging glances. Even the mayor's office knew who I was. The scope of my influence was becoming clear to them. The mayor's office? Patricia asked faintly. I'm consulting on a community development project, I said matter-of-factly. We're working on bringing more businesses to underserved neighborhoods. Of course you are, Vivian muttered, but there was no malice in it. She seemed genuinely stunned by the reality of who I was. Celeste, Derek said, reaching for my hand. I know I messed up. I know I should have asked more questions, should have shown more interest. But I care about you. I want to make this right. I looked at him, this man I'd been dating for 8 months, and tried to figure out what I felt. Disappointment, certainly. Hurt, absolutely. But was there still love there? Could there be a future? Derek, I said gently, the problem isn't that you didn't know I was successful. The problem is that you didn't care enough to find out who I really was. You were content to keep me in a neat little box labeled girlfriend, without ever really seeing me as a complete person. But I do see you. Do you? I interrupted. Do you see the woman who worked 3 jobs through college? Do you see the entrepreneur who risked everything to follow her dreams? Do you see the community leader who's trying to make a difference? Or do you just see your girlfriend who happens to be successful? He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him struggling with the question, because it was a fair question, and we both knew it. I want to see all of you, he said finally. I want to understand your world, your work, your dreams. I want to be worthy of you. It's not about being worthy of me, I said. It's about being genuinely interested in me as a person. It's about caring enough to ask questions and listen to the answers. Patricia cleared her throat. Celeste, I want to apologize. We were wrong about you, and we're sorry. What exactly are you apologizing for? I asked. For misjudging my financial status, or for treating another human being with disrespect? For both, she said, though I could tell she wasn't entirely sure what she was apologizing for. Mrs. Whitmore, I said, I don't think you understand what you did wrong. You're apologizing because you found out I'm wealthy, not because you treated me badly. If I were actually what you thought I was, a waitress working multiple jobs, would you be apologizing then? The question hung in the air like a challenge, because that was the real test, wasn't it? Not whether they could accept me now that they knew I was successful, but whether they could accept the person they thought I was. That's not... Patricia struggled to find words. That's exactly what it is, I said. And until you can acknowledge that, any apology you offer is meaningless. The evening was winding down around us. Other diners were finishing their meals. Servers were beginning to clear tables, and the restaurant was settling into its late-night rhythm. But at our table, the conversation was just beginning to reach its real climax. "So where does this leave us?" Derek asked quietly. It was a good question. Where did this leave us? Could we move forward from here? Could his family change? Could he change? Could I trust them to see me as more than just a successful business owner? "I don't know," I admitted. "I honestly don't know." And that was the truth. For the first time in years, I was facing a situation where I didn't have a clear path forward. The businesswoman in me wanted to cut my losses and move on. The part of me that cared about Derek wanted to give him a chance to prove himself. And the part of me that believed in people's capacity for growth wanted to see if his family could learn from this experience. But the part of me that had been hurt, that had been dismissed and judged and found wanting, wasn't sure forgiveness was possible. "I need time to think," I said finally. "This evening has been illuminating, but I need to process what I've learned about all of you." "How much time?" Derek asked. "I don't know," I said, "but I'll let you know when I figure it out." As I stood to leave, I took one last look at the Whitmore family. They sat there in their expensive clothes, in their bubble of privilege, finally confronted with the reality of their own prejudices. Whether they would learn from this experience or simply find new ways to justify their behavior remained to be seen. "Derek," I said, pausing at his chair, "if you're serious about wanting to understand my world, really understand it, then maybe you should start by asking yourself why you never cared to learn about it before tonight." And with that, I walked away from the table, through my restaurant, past the staff who nodded respectfully as I passed, and out into the Chicago night. The cool air felt like freedom after the suffocating atmosphere of that dinner table. But as I walked to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 3 days passed before Derek called. 3 days during which I threw myself into work, reviewing quarterly reports, meeting with suppliers, and working on the plans for my 4th restaurant. 3 days during which I tried to pretend that the dinner at Romano's hadn't shaken me more than I cared to admit. When my phone finally rang, I was in my office above my flagship restaurant, surrounded by architectural plans and financial projections. Derek's name appeared on the screen, and I stared at it for several rings before answering. "Hello, Derek." "Celeste, thank you for taking my call. I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," I admitted. "Can we talk? In person? I know you said you needed time, but I've been doing a lot of thinking and I need to see you." I looked out my office window at the bustling street below. People were going about their lives, pursuing their dreams, facing their own challenges. The world hadn't stopped because of one difficult dinner. "Where?" I asked. "Anywhere you want. Your choice." That was significant, I realized. Derek was letting me choose the location, the terms, the environment. It was a small gesture, but it showed he was at least beginning to understand the importance of giving me agency in this situation. "Millennium Park, by the Bean, tomorrow at 2. I'll be there." After hanging up, I sat back in my chair and tried to sort through my feelings. The logical part of me said to end things cleanly. Derek and I came from different worlds, had different values, different approaches to life. His family would always be a complication, always be a source of tension. But there was another part of me, a part I didn't like to acknowledge, that wondered if I was being too hard on him. After all, he hadn't known about my success because I'd deliberately hidden it. Was it fair to judge him for not asking questions when I'd been actively deflecting them? The next afternoon, I arrived at Millennium Park 15 minutes early. The weather was perfect. One of those crisp autumn days that made Chicago feel like the most beautiful city in the world. I found a bench near Cloud Gate and watched tourists take selfies with the giant sculpture, their laughter echoing across the plaza. Derek appeared right on time, looking nervous and determined in equal measure. He'd traded his usual business attire for jeans and a sweater, and I wondered if that was deliberate, an attempt to appear more approachable, less privileged. "Thank you for coming," he said. settling onto the bench beside me but maintaining a respectful distance. "You said you'd been thinking," I said without preamble. "What conclusions did you reach?" He was quiet for a moment, watching a group of children chase pigeons across the plaza. "I realized that I don't actually know you at all," he said finally. "I mean, I know your favorite coffee order and your Netflix password, but I don't know who you really are." "And whose fault is that?" "Mine," he said without hesitation. "Completely mine. I was content to keep things surface level because it was easier. Because asking deeper questions might have led to complicated answers." I had to give him credit for that admission. It couldn't have been easy to acknowledge. "What else?" I prompted. I realized that my family's behavior was inexcusable, but not surprising. And that's on me too, because I should have prepared you for who they really are. I should have warned you about their prejudices and their need to control everything in my life. "Why didn't you?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because I was hoping they'd changed. Because I wanted to believe they were better than they are. Because I was a coward who didn't want to face the reality of my family's character." We sat in silence for a while, watching the city bustle around us. A street musician was playing guitar nearby, his case open for donations, his music adding a soundtrack to our conversation. "Derek," I said finally, "what do you think happens if we try to make this work? If we somehow get past this dinner and move forward with our relationship?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I want to find out." "Your family will never accept me," I said bluntly. "Not really. They might pretend to now that they know I'm successful, but they'll always see me as an outsider. They'll always be looking for reasons to exclude me, to remind me that I don't really belong in their world." "Then maybe I don't belong in their world either," he said quietly. I turned to look at him, surprised by the conviction in his voice. "What does that mean?" "It means I've been thinking about what kind of person I want to be, what kind of life I want to live, and I don't think I want it to be the life my family has planned for me." "Derek, you can't change your entire life because of one dinner." "Can't I?" He turned to face me fully. "Celeste, that dinner showed me things about my family and about myself that I didn't want to see. The way they treated you, the assumptions they made, the casual cruelty of their dismissal. That's not who I want to be. But it's who you are," I said gently, "at least partially. You were raised by these people, shaped by their values, benefited from their worldview. You can't just decide to be different overnight." "Maybe not overnight," he agreed, "but I can start. I can begin the process of becoming the person I want to be, rather than the person they expect me to be." It was a pretty speech, and part of me wanted to believe it. But I'd seen too many people promise to change and then revert to their old patterns when the pressure mounted. "What would that look like, practically speaking?" I asked. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But I know it starts with understanding your world, really understanding it. Not just the success and the money, but the work, the struggles, the values that drive you, and your family. My family will have to accept that I'm an adult who makes his own choices. If they can't do that, if they can't treat the people I care about with respect, then maybe we need some distance." I studied his face, looking for signs of uncertainty or doubt. But he seemed genuinely committed to what he was saying. "Derek, I need you to understand something," I said. "I don't need you to choose between me and your family. I don't need you to reject your privileged background or pretend to be someone you're not. But I do need you to see me as a whole person, not just as your girlfriend or as a successful businesswoman, but as someone with depth and complexity and worth that exists independent of any relationship." "I want to do that," he said. "I want to learn how to do that." "It's not something you learn," I said. "It's something you feel. Either you see me as a complete person worthy of respect and curiosity, or you don't. Either you value my thoughts and dreams and experiences, or you don't." "I do," he said urgently. "I do value those things. I got comfortable. I got lazy. I stopped asking questions because I thought I already knew all the answers." A group of tourists approached Cloud Gate, excitedly taking photos and marveling at their reflections in the polished surface. I watched them, remembering my own first visit to the sculpture years ago, when I was still a struggling college student with big dreams and no clear path to achieving them. "Derek, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "What do you actually do for work?" He looked surprised by the question. "I'm a financial advisor. I manage investment portfolios for high net worth individuals." "Do you enjoy it?" It's fine. It's stable. It pays well." "That's not what I asked." "Do you enjoy it? Are you passionate about it? Does it fulfill you?" He was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "I don't think I do enjoy it. I do it because it's what my father expects, because it's the family business, because it's safe." "What would you do if you could do anything?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I've never really thought about it. I've never been encouraged to think about it." And there was the real tragedy, I realized. Derek wasn't just a privileged young man who'd been sheltered from reality. He was someone who'd never been encouraged to discover his own dreams, his own passions, his own purpose. He'd been so busy fulfilling other people's expectations that he'd never learned to have expectations for himself. "Derek," I said gently, "I think you need to figure out who you are before you can figure out what kind of relationship you want to have." "Are you breaking up with me?" he asked, and I could hear the fear in his voice. "I'm saying that I think you need time to discover yourself, to figure out what you actually want from life, what you value, what kind of person you want to be. And you can't do that while you're trying to save our relationship. But I don't want to lose you. And I don't want to be something you're afraid to lose," I said. "I want to be something you choose because it adds value to your life, because it aligns with your values, because it makes sense for who you are and who you want to become." We sat in silence again, the weight of the conversation settling between us. I could see Derek struggling with what I was saying, trying to process the implications. "How long?" he asked finally. "I don't know. As long as it takes for you to figure out who Derek Whitmore is, when he's not trying to please his family, or save his relationship, or live up to anyone else's expectations." "And what about us? What about what we had?" "What we had was nice," I said honestly, "but it wasn't built on a foundation of real understanding or mutual respect. It was built on assumptions and surface-level compatibility. That's not enough for the kind of relationship I want." "What kind of relationship do you want?" I thought about that for a moment, watching the city pulse with life around us. "I want a partnership with someone who sees me completely and chooses me anyway. Someone who's curious about my world and wants to be part of it. Someone who challenges me and supports me and isn't intimidated by my success. Someone who has his own dreams and passions and purpose. Someone who's your equal," he said quietly. "Someone who's my equal," I confirmed. "Not in terms of money or status, but in terms of self-awareness and emotional maturity and commitment to growth." Derek nodded slowly. I think you're right. I think I do need to figure out who I am. I think so too. And there's no guarantee that when I do, we'll be compatible?" "No guarantee at all," I admitted. "But at least we'll know for sure, one way or the other." As we stood to leave, Derek hesitated. "Celeste, can I ask you one more thing?" "Of course." "Do you think I'm capable of becoming the kind of person you could build a life with?" I looked at him, this man who'd disappointed me and hurt me, and made me question my own judgment. But I also saw someone who was genuinely trying to understand his mistakes, someone who was willing to do the hard work of self-examination, someone who might actually be capable of growth. "I think," I said carefully, "that you're capable of becoming whoever you decide to be. The question is, who do you want to be?" As I walked back to my car, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Ending things with Derek, even temporarily, was painful, but it was also liberating. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Giovanni. "How did it go?" I typed back. "I'll tell you over dinner. My treat." "Your restaurant or mine?" he replied. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in days. "Yours. I'm off duty tonight." As I drove through the city I'd helped build, past businesses I'd supported, and neighborhoods I'd invested in. I reflected on the past few days. The dinner at Romano's had been painful, but it had also been illuminating. It had shown me exactly what I was and wasn't willing to accept in my life. I was Celeste Valeria Montenegro. I was a successful businesswoman, a community leader, a scholarship provider, and a woman who refused to apologize for her achievements or dim her light to make others more comfortable. I deserved a partner who celebrated my success rather than being threatened by it, who was curious about my world rather than intimidated by it, who saw my worth as inherent rather than conditional. Whether Derek could become that person remained to be seen. But for the first time since that disastrous dinner, I felt hopeful about the future. Not because I was certain Derek and I would find our way back to each other, but because I was certain I would be fine either way. After all, I'd built an empire from nothing. I'd overcome every obstacle life had thrown at me. I'd turned a small dream into a thriving reality. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. And if Derek Whitmore wanted to be part of that future, he was going to have to prove he was worthy of it. Not because of his family's money or status, but because of who he chose to become. The ball, as they say, was in his court. 3 months later, Derek called again. But that's a story for another day.